Before Infinity War, real and permanent death among heroes was rare in the MCU, but now as we stare down Endgame, it seems to be more of a possibility than ever before, and many of our favorite characters might not escape it this time. So it's time to talk odds. If you really wanted to predict possible outcomes like Doctor Strange meditating over the Time Stone, you could say that Carol Danvers, played by Brie Larson, can absolutely die in just her second film. You could argue that she's the best candidate to go toe-to-toe with Thanos, while the other surviving Avengers are working on their secret plan to undo the snap. Being in the line of fire would place her in clear mortal danger, and it could be poetic that Carol, who only just arrived back on Earth, would sacrifice herself like the space god she is. You could even argue that, since there are more than 2 decades separating Endgame and Captain Marvel, Carol wouldn't really even be dead. Marvel could just keep churning out movies set in the intervening years. You'd be wrong. Carol is the vanguard leading the charge into the new age of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She'll stick around, and her chance of survival is very high. Everyone's favorite raccoon with Bradley Cooper's voice is already in a pretty bad spot when Endgame begins. He's on an unfamiliar planet far from home. As far as he knows, he's the only surviving member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And, most importantly, he watched his best friend Groot crumble to dust before his eyes. Rocket and Thor had a conversation in Infinity War about how hard you fight when it seems you've got nothing left to lose.
I can lose a lot. Me personally, I can lose a lot.
For Rocket, that time has arrived. Rocket and Groot have become sort of unofficial mascots for the comic side of the MCU. With a third Guardians movie on the way, it's hard to imagine a world in which they don't both pull through this, even if Rocket does end up having to wear one of those prosthetics he finds so hilarious. His chance of survival? Moderately high. Endgame's marketing materials have been very clear about what the surviving hero's goal is: take it all back.
Whatever it takes.
That's a pretty clear mission statement that gives every major character a redemptive arc as they each quest for personal vengeance. Bruce Banner, played by Mark Ruffalo, in particular has a goal. Endgame will have to address Banner's sudden inability to handle the Hulk, who has retreated into his host body and refused to fight on behalf of Banner and his friends. This left our heroes at an apparent disadvantage during the Battle of Wakanda. While Banner overcame it, he and the Hulk still have to have a conversation that will resolve in Endgame. That resolution could ultimately end with the Hulk choked out by Thanos' tremendous power, but that seems unlikely. Possible remaining romantic tension with Black Widow just gives him too much to do in the MCU besides dying. His chance of survival is moderate. Some may argue that Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, can't possibly die in Avengers Endgame because she has a movie in development. But it's also true that her film could be a prequel about her early years as a spy, which would make her current status a moot point. There's honestly a strong case for killing Natasha, and it all goes back to the very first Avengers film.
I got red in my ledger. I'd like to wipe it out.
She's a character who's always had tension bubbling beneath her cool exterior, which suggests she will never be sated unless she can die heroically to wipe away that red. That said, there are other characters whose deaths would probably be more compelling to the overall story, and it's very easy to see Natasha's being pretty useful in the MCU going forward. There's a world in which she could become the new generation's Nick Fury, an advisor and spy master who's seen it all, done it all, and has a cool head under pressure. Her chance of survival is moderate. Paul Rudd's Ant-Man clearly has a big role to play in Endgame. In his previous films, 2 solo adventures and a supporting role in Captain America: Civil War, he's primarily played a comedic role. He sat out Infinity War, but his journey to the quantum realm at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp suggests he might have some scientific answers for how the team can change history and defeat Thanos. He's front and center this time around, which means a greater risk of death. The Wasp could very easily be resurrected and take his place in a future Avengers lineup, and his daughter Cassie, a Marvel Comics superhero in her own right, could take over. But Scott Lang still seems to have more heroic potential left in him, so let's hope he gets to keep having his little, or sometimes giant, adventures. He has a moderate chance of survival. In the lead-up to Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, 2 major character deaths have been discussed more than any other. One we'll get to later, but the other is Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. Tony Stark is the godfather of the MCU, the original hero who launched it all. Sometimes he saved the world, sometimes he caused the problems, but he's always been there, and his journey has all been building to this confrontation with Thanos. What better way for it to end than for Tony and the Mad Titan to go down at the same time? It would be a poetic ending, but is it really what's in store for Tony Stark? If any of the MCU's major characters could have a life beyond superheroics, funding and supporting and cheering on future Avengers as a benefactor, it's him. So his chance of survival is questionable. The journey of Chris Hemsworth's Thor as a fallen hero with nothing left to lose, pushing for one last shot at victory, makes up the backbone of Infinity War. His story runs from the very first scene all the way to the seconds before the snap, when he embeds Stormbreaker in Thanos' chest. Heading into Endgame, all the Avengers bear a burden of loss and defeat, but Thor bears it more than the others. It's easy to see how Thor could be marching to his own death in Endgame, and how his final act of redemption could be one of self-sacrifice. Chris Hemsworth has been in the MCU since 2011, so his retirement could be imminent. But simply sending Thor off to try and rebuild Asgard, having restored himself as a hero, could be just as satisfying, so his chance of survival is questionable. James Rhodey Rhodes, aka War Machine, is one of the MCU's original superheroes. He was introduced in its very first film, played by Terrence Howard, gained a superhero identity in Iron Man 2, in which Don Cheadle took on the role, and has been a player in many major stories since. The running joke has always been that Rhodey isn't quite as relevant and powerful as Iron Man, which is noted in Avengers Age of Ultron.
Why do I even talk to you guys? Everywhere else that story kills.
That's the whole story?
Yeah, it's a War Machine story.
Oh, this is very good then.
His primary role in Captain America Civil War was as a casualty, and in Infinity War he never rose above supporting character status. War Machine seems primed for an endgame appearance that could elevate him by ending his story with a blaze of glory. Watching Rhodey go down fighting could be a satisfying way to bid farewell to a character who's been around for more than a decade, and it could give Tony Stark the drive to keep funding the Avengers in his honor. For those reasons, we're putting his chance of survival at moderately low. Hawkeye was conspicuously absent from Infinity War, but his emotional journey is going to be a major part of Endgame. Avengers Age of Ultron told us that when he's not out saving the world, Clint Barton, played by Jeremy Renner, has a family he loves dearly. And the second Endgame trailer revealed a mentor relationship with a young girl who could be a future Hawkeye. By Endgame, Clint has apparently lost all that. He's a vigilante taking on what's left of the world through violence before his old friend Natasha comes to retrieve him. That sets up two potential outcomes. Either he does his part as a member of a successful mission and reunites with his resurrected family, or he dies trying to give them their lives back. Both are very possible. But watching a broken Clint Barton make the final sacrifice on behalf of his children seems like an emotional power play the filmmakers might not be able to resist. His chance of survival is moderately low. In the comic The Infinity Gauntlet, Nebula is a key character. She actually ends up wielding the Infinity Gauntlet herself. We're not predicting anything like that for Karen Gillan's film version of Nebula, but she could have an important role in Endgame. Nebula comes into the film as the one remaining character who knows Thanos intimately, and she's also well aware of what he did to her sister Gamora in Infinity War. Since Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Nebula has been on a redemptive arc that led her to fighting alongside the Avengers and the Guardians. Now, with a possible way to defeat Thanos in sight, she's not likely to slow down. Endgame presents a very clear opportunity for Nebula to sacrifice herself. It's hard to see her walking away alive, so her chance of survival is low. Steve Rogers has been knocked down yet again by a bully. He's sure to stand up with his fist raised and declare,
I can do this all day.
Captain America, played by Chris Evans, turned out to have a limited role in Avengers Infinity War, but the snap has left him as the de facto leader of the remaining Avengers on Earth. Trailers are placing him in a key position as the man who will lead the fight to take back the universe. Repeated hints that Evans is done with the role after 8 years suggest that Captain America is going to die. We can't know for sure, even if it is true that Evans is walking away from the role after Endgame. Captain America could simply quietly retire to a cabin somewhere content to split logs. He could step away from active Avengers duty. But none of that would be very climactic, so he could very well go down fighting, leaving a grateful universe to mourn him while Tony Stark continues to protect Earth. It's impossible to know for sure, but the death of the first Avenger certainly seems to be approaching. His chance of survival is very low. Even as we talk about all these horrible character deaths, Avengers Endgame is a film in which more major characters could end up resurrected than permanently dead. For example, Black Panther and Spider-Man have movies approaching, so we shouldn't expect them to stay dead. Nor are Shuri, the Wasp, Bucky, Falcon, Scarlet Witch, and Vision likely to stay down, since they all seem to have promising futures. In a world in which the Avengers restore many of their friends, what does death really mean? It's a comic book world, so deaths are almost never permanent in the long run. Will that change here? One thing that seems very clear about Endgame is that it's bound to rewrite the rules of the MCU. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about the Avengers are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.